As Christians, we know we're supposed to have faith, but is it faith in Jesus or faith in God? Is it faith in the cross or is it faith in heaven? You see, our theology about faith and what it actually looks like and what it's supposed to be and how we're supposed to actually work it out kind of falls apart, I think, for most Christians. So today, we're going to Bible journal in Hebrews 11 and kind of a topical Bible study on faith. Let's dive in. So last night we had our weekly Bible study with the youth here at our house, and we got to the conversation of why do we obey God if we're always covered in sin? Like if we're always broken, if we're always going to sin, if even our most holy if even our most holy actions are like dirty rags to the Lord, then what's the point of obeying God? Like what's the point of trying to be holy? And the youth really didn't have a good answer. When it came down to it, they really gave us answers that kind of circled around, well, God is trying to make us better. And that's not the Christian faith, that's morality. It was a bit disheartening for my husband and I, but even more so, it made me wonder if they understand faith, because it really does come down to that. I don't know if this is like the right way to put it, but I think all humans have this like bank account of faith and we spend it towards things. Most secularists put it towards money, safety, health, popularity, success, those kinds of things. They put their faith in their job because they think it's going to bring them monetary gains and success or popularity or whatever. As Christians, we know we're called to faith. And we know that we are saved by faith. We often say, yeah, we're saved by faith. And that's so true. But we can easily overlook the truth that if it was our faith that saved us, we would be our own savior. So really, it's the one whom we put our faith in that saves. Now look with me at Hebrews 11:1. Now right away, you'll see that I have previous notes, and all it's doing is just reminding me to not just pick up at 11:1, but to remind myself that this is a whole long letter. This is part of a conversation. The chapters were added later. So let's start with chapter 10, verse 39. But we are not, let's underline this with red. We are not those who shrink back and are destroyed, but instead those who have faith and preserve their souls. So right then and there, it's like we are defined by our faith. And then the conversation keeps going. Now, faith is the assurance of things hoped for and the conviction of things not seen. I always chuckle whenever I read this verse because back in the day, I think it was the start of MySpace, but it might have been the start of Facebook. There was a section on one of those websites where it asked for you to kind of define yourself or describe yourself. And I remember being lost. I was like, I don't know how to define myself. I'm a preteen girl. Like I have no sense of identity. I am literally 12. I remember thinking to myself, isn't there like a verse that uses my name or something? Looking it up and putting this verse as the description of who I am. However, this verse isn't really a definition of faith. It's more of a description of faith. And that's an important thing to keep in mind. I have often used this verse as kind of a definition of faith, and it's really not. It describes faith, but this whole chapter is more of a definition of faith. Do you already see that by faith is repeated multiple times? And notice that there's a connection between by faith and by the word of God. And then there's this interesting note about, so what is seen was not made out of things that are visible. So there's this comparison between visible and invisible. Kind of reminds me of the Bible study that we just did on Ephesians 6 and the comparison there that we don't battle against the visible but the invisible. And then Hebrews 11, it's actually, you'll see right here, I have it marked. This is the chapter that's the Hall of Faith. And I'll share some of this with y'all in a second. But the rest of this chapter goes through example after example. Guys, it's beautiful. I would cry with you if we went through this all verse by verse because it is just gorgeous. If you guys ever want to be really encouraged by the faith of fellow believers that have lived on before you, their lives are like captured in the Bible, and we get to look at them and be encouraged and motivated and inspired by their faith. And God actually ordained that and tells us here in this chapter to be motivated and encouraged by their faith. So if you guys ever feeling worn down in your faith walk, I encourage you to look there. It's the Hebrews 11, like that's the purpose of it. So the rest of this chapter goes through example after example. So we've got like Noah and Abel and Abraham, really good examples of the faith. And it just goes through so many examples. Y'all will remember in our Rahab Bible study, which I will link right here, that she is actually mentioned in Hebrews 11, which is huge, you know? a Gentile woman being mentioned in the Hall of Faith is huge. If you guys have not seen that Bible study, you really need to. But anyway, so maybe you want to pause this video and read through that yourself. But notice in particular the ending of this chapter. And that's where I'll jump with you right now. So going through example after example, the writer says, "And what more shall I say? For time would fail me to tell of," and he just lists Gideon and Barak, Samson, blah, 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 who through faith conquered kingdoms. One thing that I meant to mention previously is that there's an emphasis on faith being effective, faith leading to action. Let's just write this here. I probably have it written elsewhere. But faith leads to actions. But then there's almost a switch. So faith did all of these things. Let's change our pen color. But then there's also like a consequence of faith. Some were tortured, imprisoned, stoned, suffered upon suffered, of whom the world was not worthy. Those words are chilling to me. Guys, the gospel of Jesus, the gospel that the early church understood, was a gospel that would lead to most likely death, that would lead to martyrdom, to suffering, to being ostracized by your Jewish family. The gospel that the first century church understood was a gospel that stripped them of everything that they may have had of wealth on this side of earth, whether it was their ability to take part in like commerce and the economy, their family, their social identity, their safety, their health, everything. That is sometimes, I think, so often what we forget, especially in the Western world. Now, I don't know about the church worldwide because I know that the church in other parts of the world is being persecuted and that there are martyrs. Many other places of the world, the church is the minority. But in places where the church is the majority culture, especially in the South where I am, and I know from my statistics, the majority of my viewers are in the South in America, we are part of the majority culture. We are very comfortable in our Christianity because most people claim it. But the thing that we forget, because we're in that kind of culture, is that Jesus was a loser. My seminary professor said this: by any human standards, Jesus was a loser. Now he's using this word loser, tongue in cheek, to trigger emotions within us. We're supposed to be like, whoa, no, he's not a loser. So by any human standards, Jesus was a loser whose whole focus centered on giving, centered on dying, and centered on losing. So often we want to pursue, like, how can I be a Christian, but like a cool Christian? Like, I can still follow Jesus, but like not be made fun of all the time, right? And like, can I still like love Jesus, but also be super wealthy? And like, can I still follow Jesus, but have everything that I want in this world? And what we fail to realize is that following Jesus requires a complete surrender. I don't know if I should put this in the video. But real talk, last night, my husband and I were kind of just chatting, and I was expressing to my husband, you know, I serve my 2 boys, really my 3 boys, including my husband, all day long. I was expressing to my husband, you know, if I want to, you know, make babies, I have to die to myself. If I want to be loved and like have a husband, I need to die to myself and serve. It's a direct correlation between me wanting these things, but also me having to like give up of myself, me having to die to myself. And when I want to go take a nap, I really need to go fold that laundry or cook that meal or whatever. Even though I follow Christ, even though I know I have saving faith in Jesus Christ, I still, in my human sinfulness, not just reject, but I loathe the idea of dying to myself. It's like the most disgusting taste on my tongue to think that I might have to die to my desires and do something that would actually be bad for me, but good for the betterment of the kingdom or the church or my family or whatever. Guys, that is what faith leads to. That is what Christianity leads to. That is the definition of Christianity that we're seeing. Jesus did not humble himself to be born into a dirty manger covered with animals and animal hair and feces, to only die a horrible death in disgrace, being flogged and spit on and the rest. God of all gods humbled himself beyond what even me, a sinner, even me who deserves this, could ever imagine humbling myself to. And the disgrace of Christ is our grace. The disgrace of Christ, him humbling himself on the cross, is where we receive that grace, that saving grace of faith. Ligon Duncan said, faith means believing God when you cannot imagine that he loves you. Isn't that beautiful? And so we're called to suffer. We're called to die to ourselves. We're called to be losers and to do it all by faith, like the examples in Hebrews 11. Let's just continue to chapter 12, because faith is not a moment of faith or moments of faith. It's a lifetime of faith. So remember, we just read about all these examples of the faith, and then the scriptures pick up with, therefore, since we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let's lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that's set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith. Just as the heroes of the faith in Hebrews 11 are so encouraging for us to read, we too have a cloud of witnesses. We too can live a life of faith for God's glory by his grace, and encourage other believers to do the same. And don't get me wrong, it's not like faith is just doing good work, but it's a result of God working in us. Make sure you're subscribed, and I'll link some videos, but I really hope you go read Hebrews 11. Okay, bye guys.